let's say you're a pheasant hunter in South Dakota, which is a pretty common scenario.
It is.
You may not care about trapping at all. You may never trap in your life. You may not ever know a trapper, but you want to talk about taking care of some nest predators and having a lot of roosters on the landscape this fall. Trapping is a part of that. And I wanted to ask you about some of the studies you alluded to that you were involved in, the radio collaring and the elk, mule deer, all that good stuff. And then you mentioned, you'd done some stuff with pheasants, I think, and maybe doves or something you said. All of these things, we think about, pheasant hunting. All of these critters are dependent on one another in some way, or dependent on the same kind of habitat. And those ecosystems out there are so interlinked, even though we kind of just like compartmentalize them. And from your perspective, you've probably seen a ton of that, haven't you?
Absolutely. I mean, you're right. I mean, the ecosystems here in South Dakota, we do have some complexities when it comes to different landscape types. We have the tallgrass prairie, the prairie pothole region, which cranks out tons of waterfowl, excellent white-tailed deer habitat, excellent pheasant habitat. You go farther west, it's more of the Serengeti, if you will, with the short grass prairies. You have the pronghorn habitat. I always call them pronghorn. They're antelope to a lot of folks too. And then the mule deer start kicking in as well when you start heading that direction. And then we have an incredible elk herd actually in the Black Hills. Over 7,000 elk live in the Black Hills ecosystem there. Very unique area all around, just a kind of an eruption of ponderosa pine that's in the middle of the prairie. So it's really cool in that sense. So we have these we are extremely diversified here in South Dakota with different habitats, different landscapes, but your comment is correct. They're all tied. They're all linked. And the habitat, especially in eastern South Dakota, just doesn't benefit pheasants. It benefits the whole gamut of across the board, the species that are living there. I mean, white-tailed deer do excellent in pheasant habitat, CRP. Just any sort of perennial grass, idle grass, is something that obviously those birds and those deer fawns really need for cover and that sort of thing. So, yeah, I mean, if we do get it compartmentalized and put things into silos, I mean, you sometimes get too narrow visioned, and it is much broader than that. I mean, one thing always impacts the other, and right now we're really looking at, habitat's the focus in this agency, and our Governor Noem she's very focused on that as well. And it's excellent. It's so exciting being a sportsman in this state, listening to some of the direction, that it's focused on habitat and their next generation. And that's really cool. I mean, that's really cool that, we're going to put a lot of effort into establishing habitat, a working lands mentality that does fit in the farm ranch operation, that does, look at helping the return on investment. We're in a tough time with agriculture right now, as you know, and we got to make sure those tools are in their toolbox as an agricultural producer, if that's the route they want to go. And, we have 1.3 million acres of walk-in across the state. We lease that. That's private land, but we lease it for public hunting opportunity. It's an excellent program. We're trying to even increase that more. We'd like to get 1.6, 1.8 million acres, and we're on our way, but it costs some money, and we're looking at ways to generate some additional revenue. We have the Hunt for Habitat going on right now. It's a raffle. We had, I think, about 15,000 raffle licenses have been bought so far. So that'll help. I mean, that could be another 200,000 that we're going to put right into habitat, right into managing the public land we already have, managing some of the school and public land that's out there, managing some of the access programs, trying to put, some more money into all those types of things that directly impact not just residents, but non-residents alike. So,
yeah. So that I want to dig into that a little bit, because, South Dakota's doing it, but a lot of states are doing some variation of a walk-in program, funded through license sales, or here in Minnesota, you pay an extra $3 and you can hunt. I can't remember how many thousands of walk-in area acres it is, but it's the best deal going. I mean, that's like a cup of coffee at Starbucks, and now you have 200,000 acres of pheasant land or whatever to hunt. But you see states addressing that and going, hey, this is a way to open up acreage. This is a way to provide some more access, spread out the pressure a little bit, work in a cooperative way with private landowners. And man, I love seeing that, because what that means is, on the surface level, of course, we have more places to hunt. We have more places to take our kids, more places to recreate. But it also means that ranch where, like we've talked about, the farmers are getting smoked right now, and it sucks. They got it rough. They could lease to one private individual or a group of guys who are going to, I want to kill big bucks and we'll write you a big check. That's gone from everybody. Or we can start a program like that. And I'm not saying that, like hey, I like capitalism. If you have that opportunity and you want to do it, go ahead. But I like this option better personally, just because you see there's the benefits for the greater hunting public are so much better.
Yeah, no, they are definitely. And that's something, building a relationship with the landowner, developing that trust with that landowner, and that's huge. I mean, that's such a big part. South Dakota, 81% of the landscape in South Dakota is privately owned across the entire state. So we're a private land state. Those relationships with our producers are second to none. We got to be willing and able to work with our producers. And that's such a big thing for me. I mean, I'm a farm kid, so I can relate heavily. I mean, my dad's probably baling hay as we're talking right now. And my father-in-law's, he's probably looking at his cornfields as we're talking right now. But, and some things, sometimes that gets lost. We cannot paint the picture that producers, landowners are a bad thing at all. I mean, they're awesome people. They want to work with us. And one thing I always tell sportsmen and women is recreation and respect. I mean, go in, respect, develop that relationship, shake their hand, get to know who they are. They're good people. And we can't lose sight of that either. I mean, one of the things you see with some of this, the new up and comers is this sense of they don't need to do that part when it comes to hunting. They can just find, the public land and run to it. And they forget about, well, what about all the other land? And there's a ton of opportunities out there to knock on some doors, meet some new people. They're great people. And really just develop that relationship, and that'll pay off in the long run. And that goes a long ways. Closing the gates, picking up the garbage, just being a respectful hunter. That's going to also help us 30 years from now having an opportunity to hunt, because that all plays a role in all of this entire conversation. That's the big picture stuff that we're talking about.
Yeah. Well, it's just a matter of common respect, but it's also a matter of understanding the level of opportunity that's available to you for experience. It's real easy. And believe me, I come from the outdoor media. I get it. I've been a part of this problem a million times. Like we've talked about in this podcast, we don't put Forkies on the cover of magazines. We put 185 inches for a reason. But the reality is those situations you're talking about with the public land, I feel like we're a little bit getting there where we're kind of stepping away from the trophy mentality totally. Like we went through a bad phase for a while. It's just like in bow hunting, we went through a phase, I don't know, mid 2000s where we were like, our bows have to be so fast. Speed is everything. How does it chrono? It was a pro shop owner's nightmare because everybody came in and all they cared about was how fast a freaking bow was. It says 340 on the advertisement. How come I'm only getting 287? Like, anyway, different podcast there. But what we're seeing, I think a little bit, and I think, Steven Ranella and Randy Newberg and a few guys like that have really driven this change in the hunting public eyes where it's like, hey, you have an awesome resource at your disposal, not only in the game animals, but in the land that you can access for free or through the money you were going to spend to hunt anyway. And the experience of being able to do that is worth a lot. And I'm hoping, like you said about, hey, respect the landowners and the private land open to the public, respect the public land. I'm hoping we're kind of becoming a self-policing, little society of our own where we're like, there should be shame in that. If you're costing people opportunities because you're a pig out on public land, that sucks. And I'll tell you what, I wrote an article one time, I don't know, maybe 4 years ago. I was out hunting on some public land here in the Twin Cities. We were duck hunting and there were some other guys in there, and the way we walked out, we had to walk by where this other group of guys had been standing, and they were from what we could see, it looked like a hell of a sky blasting operation. But we got over there and it was just wrappers and plastic water bottles. They literally brought in whatever they were having for breakfast and just threw it on the ground and walked out. And I took a picture of it and I wrote an article about it. And I was like, man, we have to do better. The response was amazing, but I don't know if you can get rid of that element. I hope we can pare it down, but I don't know if that ever goes away.
Well, and I think, the old saying, one bad egg can ruin the batch. And I mean, there is a lot of truth to that. It only takes one. It only takes a 1 out of 100. I don't think there's a lot of folks that disrespect the land and the landowner. I think the vast majority, at least the folks I interact with and be around, they get it. They understand our abilities to do this in the future. They depend on the behavior and the activities we react to and respond to today. And, that can't be said enough, though, because we can't take this for granted. Hunting isn't a right. It's a privilege. And we got to look at it that way because, like you mentioned, Stephen Rennell, and I listen to his podcast quite often. And, folks like that, they get it. They so see the future of conservation, is at stake, and there is some concern out there. If we don't band together as this, group of hunters and anglers and folks that really care about the land, we could be in trouble because there's not a lot of us nationwide. There's not, 5% of folks hunt in America, which isn't that many. So we got a lot going against us, but we also got a lot going for us. I mean, we got folks like yourself and other folks that are raising the awareness of this, saying, hey guys, let's think about this before we actually go out and do something stupid that will, negatively impact our hunting heritage 10, 15 years down the road. So no, I think it is getting better. I see that too, that, some folks, I won't say they took things for granted, but it was a more of a way of life for more people. So there was more exposure to it. Now it's becoming, the core is shrinking per se, maybe a little bit. So we got to be more cognizant because as our groups get smaller, which we're trying to curtail that. I mean, our recruitment efforts are paying off. We're trying, to get more people out in the field. Getting, an increase in participation is the goal of us department because of what I talked about earlier. It runs wildlife management. So I think we're going to turn the corner, and we have been turning the corner. We are concerned about the big loss of baby boomers, here in the very near future. The millennials aren't so engaged, but they're starting to become more engaged in how they, want to hunt and fish. And that local board movement's a big thing that we can really, glean some additional participation from. But man, all this stuff's tied together, and we're all, and I always tell folks, when we're sitting there arguing at a public meeting about how many deer licenses should be here or over there and how many I can get versus you can get, I always say, guys, we're in this together. I mean, come on. We can't be arguing amongst each other. We're in this together. We all have the common goal. That's to enjoy the resources we all are here to enjoy and love. And that's a pretty neat deal. But yeah, no, I think you make a very valid point for sure.
I mean, it's real easy to be a myopic and view this from a narrow scope. And, maybe this is a poor comparison. Are you going elk hunting this year?
Yeah, I'm actually heading to Wyoming the 15th of September, 14th. So yeah, absolutely. I can't live without elk hunting every year. So
okay, well, so we're going to talk about that in a second. But so last night I went for a run. I'm hunting northern Colorado. I'm going out on the 18th. And so I'm listening to Rogan's podcast with Bernie Sanders on there. And Bernie and I don't agree on a lot of stuff. I don't get into politics too much here, but they got into the gun control thing. And I'm just listening to it and I'm going, you've just made up your mind that guns are bad and you have to get rid of them without thinking of the consequences of A, you're going to punish almost entirely a group of law-abiding people who've never done anything wrong with their guns in their entire life. B, prohibition has never worked for anything we want. So even though you say we got to get rid of assault weapons, whatever, not going to happen, man. You're not going to get rid of them. And it's like it's a non-starter, but to sit there and just say that over and over again. And it's like this just little narrow view on it. Like, well, they're bad and they should go away without considering all of the other things that go into it. And the fact that even though you may think that's a great idea, it's not going to work, Bernie, not going to happen. So it always pays to keep an open mind. And, it was an intro. The reason I listened to it, I wanted to listen to it anyway. I love Rogan's podcast, but The reason I listened to it, I was like, I know if I start this podcast, I could see it was an hour and 20 minutes long. I'm like, if I go for a run, I'm going to listen to this because I would never listen to Bernie otherwise. And I'm like, this will just force because once I start running, I'm not going to stop and change podcasts. So I'm going to listen to this whole thing and hear what he has to say. And I came home and my wife was like, how was your run? I was like, well, the run was good, but I'm like, I heard a lot of dumb ideas that don't matter. Anyway, total tangent. Let's talk elk hunting. Cause you had said that to me, when we were chatting before, that you are pretty hooked on the elk thing.
Yeah, man, I am. I started hunting Colorado a few years ago, well, probably like 6 or 7 years ago now. I got horses too. I have some pack horses, and we go in and we get lost and we spike it. We never come back to the truck until we have an elk in the pack saddle. But no, man, that's what I love to do. And I hunt some pretty rugged country. I killed a bull 3 years ago, actually, at 12,200 feet. So it's about as high up there as you can get in the boulder scrambles. And that's just fun. I mean, I just love it. I mean, I'm going to Wyoming this year and trying to place new, taking the bow and arrow and just giving it a different look and trying to find some new ground, really. And yeah, I mean, camping and hiking and looking for elk. I mean, that's where you clear your mind and really can see, man, there's some awesome country out there. And there's nothing better than listening to Bull's Bugle either. I mean, that's cool. That's a lot of fun. I've been on a lot of really awesome hunts with a lot of good buddies, and you develop great relationships, and it doesn't get much better than that, in my opinion. So
yeah, it's pretty awesome. So what's the idea behind September 14th? Why the timing?
Well, it was always a week earlier. I always picked the 10th or like the 20th. Right before somewhat the lockdown in the elk world where they're actually with the herds breeding. But, you know, I would say a lot to do with this timing is dealing with work. There's a work obligation I got a little before that. So I got to attend that. And it just kind of was the window of opportunity I have here for a week to get away. But bulls will still be losing their minds. They'll be with the herds. Those herd bulls will be rounding up those cows, and it'll be action packed. I mean, you'll be hitting it perfect too. And one thing I do like, though, is the pre-rut quite a lot because, you know, they're really moving around a lot. They're hitting them wallows hard. That later time frame, they're still hitting those wallows, but not as much because they're finding the herds. They're with cows, you know, that are in estrus already, so they're not moving as much. But no, it's been good. I mean, last year we found, you know, a pretty big herd bull that was all by himself, and it was, I think, September 13th or something, and he just wasn't with his cows. So, but no, that was good and sometimes you just get lucky. I mean, a lot of times being in the right place at the right time is what it's all about. But finding elk is the toughest part once you find them, you know, and then you hunt them hard and stick with the herd. That's my best advice. Everybody always says, we found elk, you know, day 3, and then we didn't find any more elk. I was, well, did you go back to the pickup or what'd you do? And they always say, yeah, we went back to base camp. I'm like, well, that was your first problem. You don't need a base camp. Yep. Just sleep under the stars, you know. Who cares if you have a tent or not? Just stay on that elk herd, and that's some of what we always do, you know. You got a saddle, so you got a saddle mat or whatever you want to call it. Sleep on that and just sleep under the stars sometimes or keep a little tent with you, but never leave the elk herd. So,
you know, that I asked you about the timing because I've always hunted earlier too, and I'm going later this year. And my wife told me last night that I don't have to be home till the 30th. So I have the 18th through the 30th. I know, I'm excited. But a common thread, I'm by no means an elk hunting expert, but I interview them a lot. And a common thread is just what you said there, where, you know, if you're, you know, going to do the bivvy thing, if you're going to do the get back into the backcountry and do the 7 miles in, be committed to that style. Because you can do the hunt from the trailhead and find them, pick new spots, go into gnarly drainages, whatever. You can do that. If that's your style, go ahead. But if you're like, I'm going to do a true backcountry hunt, you got to be prepared to stick with it, because if you do what you said there, you go in, you find them, and you leave. Those elk could be 2 miles away or 4 miles away, and it's it's over, man.
It is over. Then you spend 3 days looking for the herd you were already on. So, no, that elk hunt is so dang fun. I mean, I just love it. I love meeting up with buddies I haven't seen, you know, all year from across the country, and meeting at the trailhead of a backcountry area and be like, man, how are you doing? And that's just the time you get with those types of folks. So that's pretty cool. That's pretty neat. Just that relationship building in that sense too.
Yeah, elk hunting is a special thing that we have access to, and I really hope we keep it. I hope that if you live in a state where you don't have elk, I hope there's some state out there that lets you come and hunt them for a long time, because it is awesome. So, in your wildlife research history of collaring, doing studies, participating in those things, what is one thing you learned out there? I don't care what game animal it is, upland birds, elk, whatever, that you learned during a study or you witnessed where you're like, man, I'm using that to inform some of my hunting decisions. Is there one thing that stands out to you?
Yeah, I mean, I would say I'm a huge deer fanatic. I've researched deer for a long time, and you know, there is nothing more important than the wind. There is nothing more important than always being downwind of a critter, regardless. I mean, and I always say you can never fool a buck's nose, and I think there's so much truth into that, especially mature buck's nose. But I mean, one of them deals where the wind is everything. And when before I had kids, I had about 20 tree stands all over. And I would never hunt a tree stand if the wind wasn't absolutely perfect. I mean, it had to be perfect. There couldn't be like, gosh, it might be okay. No, it had to be perfect. And that's one of the biggest pieces of advice that I always give folks is, man, the wind is so critical, because those big deer, they're so smart. I mean, and they are. They live in a small home range for their 10 months out of the year. September rolls around, they lose their velvet, they just, boom, they leave. And they go find, a lot of times they make that home range twice the size or 3 times the size. And then when that rut comes around November, I mean, all bets are off. I mean, they can be about anywhere. You have, I call them like local deer. You have those deer that are still there. You'll have them on your trail cam year round. Then you'll have some bucks that just show up. And that's true. I mean, they'll roam. And sometimes I've seen deer move 20, 30 miles in South Dakota that have been radio collared. So you never know what you're going to get. But man, I think the wind's so critical. We caught a lot of fawns. During the last 5 years in South Dakota, I mean, we caught about 300-400 fawns every year between about 2013 to about 2016. And one of the biggest things there, we didn't use vaginal implant transmitters. We didn't catch the doe and put a transmitter in the doe, so when she had the fawn, it fell out. I always told staff, because I was kind of the crew leader of a lot of them, well, almost all of them, that, hey, man, you got to turn into a coyote. And you got to sit on a hill, watch this doe. If she looks like she's got a fawn, you just got to sit there all day long. And she'll give that fawn up. They got to eat every 4 to 6 hours. But I said, you got to play the wind, because if she knows you're there, she'll never go to that fawn. I mean, you got to be a coyote. And we had a heck of a fawn capture crew. I mean, we had a lot of good coyotes in game fishing parks and caught a lot of fawns. And I always said the goal is 1 fawn a day per person, because that was, I had enough people out there to make sure we got our 300 marked. And that was so critical to our population models, because that recruitment is the metric you need to measure to see how much growth you see that next year. And yeah, that was a lot of fun. And I learned a lot in just doing that. I mean, catching those fawns, those adult does they're such good mothers. I mean, I've watched them kill coyotes before. I watched a mule deer doe kill a coyote, and the coyote, I mean, ended up killing her fawn, but she did kill that coyote too. And there has been, they're incredible mothers. They're incredibly social animals. I have a ton of respect for deer, ton of respect for elk for that matter too. And elk are a little different. They're a little more bold, and they kind of just go off on their own and do their thing. And they're great mothers too, but same deal. If those elk caught your wind, boy, all bets are off. Might as well start over.
Yep.